to navigate this new landscape. Let's welcome him to the stage. Marco, thank you.
Many thanks for the kind introduction. Hello, thanks a lot to Marcel and Torsten and the whole DAPA team for inviting me. It's an honor. And congratulations to this great event. It was, again, excellent. Yeah, my name is Marco Felsberger. I'm a senior advisor for supply chain resilience with Prewave. And Prewave is, not sure if we can get the slides up here. Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was already my task, sorry. Yeah, Prewave is an Austrian tech company on the forefront of AI-driven supply chain risk and resilience management. But instead of sharing with you the details about the tech and what we are doing, I'd rather like to share with you the founding story of Prewave, because I think that's quite interesting. And our co-founder, Lisa Smith, worked on a PhD, and she was looking into 2012, she was looking into the topic how we can analyze social media data to make more informed risk decisions. And she started in 2012 and didn't know exactly where this project will take her. And in 2013, there was a very big event. Not sure who remembers it. It was the Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh. And this was a textile factory where roughly over 1,000 people died in this collapse of the building. And she was looking, having already done a lot of the research in this area, she was looking into this incident and was questioning herself, would this be preventable in future? Could we have prevented such a tragic event? And she said, after analyzing the data she had, she came to the conclusion, yes, it was preventable, because there were signs on social media, early warning signs on social media, where workers complained. There were mentionings in local newspapers of protests of workers in this area, and she thought if we only have a system in place which puts all the info together, which makes the big companies aware that this is one part of their supply chain, because the Rana Plaza was producing for many big corporations, then if we could analyze all those data, which we get through social media and local news information, and put it as a risk information to the very same point that we know, okay, this is our supplier, this is within our supply chain, and there are issues. And this was the big goal that she found and create a platform which is able to do this. And this is what we are doing at Prewave in a nutshell. And that's why a resilient supply chain is within our DNA, so to say. But what is a resilient supply chain and what puts it at risk? This is what we will be exploring in the next 20-25 minutes. And I put together a very brief agenda. So first we look what puts our supply chains at risks, are they even at risks? And at the end, I'd like to offer a high-level bird's-eye view, three-step approach to give you a starting point, how you could start making your own supply chain more resilient. Are our supply chains at risk? This was a question asked by the World Economic Forum for the risk report in 2024. And the answer was quite staggering. So almost 30% of executives, top management, and politicians thought that the world in the next 2 years will be at least turbulent or stormy. Turbulent or stormy, at the one end, the negative extreme, which they could have voted for. On the other side of the range would have been words like peace and calmful. So we see the next 2 years are already perceived as very challenging. And if you ask them what they think about the next 10 years, it got even worse. So 60%, more than 60%, think that we will face severe issues and troubles in the next 10 years. And two of the main things, risks, events, which puts our supply chains and our world in general at risk is geopolitics and climate change. And we've heard it several times, and this will be not a lecture about geopolitics and geopolitical tensions. I try to offer an approach which helps you, every one of you, to assess your exposure, for example, to geopolitical risks or to climate risks within your supply chain. Because without knowing that you are probably affected by it, by certain kinds of events, you have no chance to deal with it. To illustrate that, and I think Sarah did in the morning a very good presentation and an overview already about some of the global maritime choke points which you see up there. The global maritime choke points are strategic, specific choke points in the world where the shipping has to go through. So there are 8 primary global choke points, and no matter what you're consuming, what you're getting, what you're used to, is going somehow through that choke points. This could be agriculture or food, could be medicine, could be consumer electronics, whatever it is. It has to flow through those choke points, the red ones. Then we have some secondary choke points, not as important currently. But why I'm showing you this is because many companies have a hard time approaching resilience, starting analyzing their supply chains, because they think, okay, look, we have suppliers in the thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s even. Where should I start? And the point is, when we start at the top, it's getting always easier. We take the macro view, the bird's eye view, and we do not need to think about all other suppliers if we do not cover the risks at the choke points. Everyone has in mind still the recent events in the Suez Canal, for example, and how the effect was on the economy, Bab el-Mandab Strait and the Houthi attacks, and so on and so forth. The global maritime choke points are by definition points which can be easily attacked because they are narrow, there are physical threats like natural disasters or conflicts, interstate conflicts. And if you view your supply chain, and this is how I usually try to approach resilience and resilience within supply chains. If you view supply chains as physical chains where one link is connected to the other, it gets much easier to think about it. Let me explain why. You do not need to know every chain link in detail to analyze the chain. What will make the chain break is not dependent on that you know every bit and piece of every link. It's also not important that you know every risk which is threatening the chain to break. Also not necessary and not possible, to be honest. We would draw on the corporations in bureaucracy. What is the only one thing which is interesting for you to determine the strength of a chain? It's the weakest link, and this is what we have to find out. And we start at the top, finding the weakest link in the global value chains, and work our way down to our localized supply chains. This is how I would approach it, and this is which makes it much easier to deal with it. And when you analyze your supply chain, then you probably will see that you have some knowledge about it. Usually the mapping is not that advanced in the companies, but you know where you source it, you know where you have to get it to build your products, to ship your products, to sell your products, and then you can draw already a line and see which of those choke points do they have to pass. And there are threats which are relatively similar to all of those choke points, because there are either natural disasters or geopolitical or political tensions, civil unrest, whatever it is. And since we have heard it in the morning already a bit, I will not go into more detail here. But be aware that this would be a starting point to start your analysis of your global supply chains. The second thing is a thing you're also aware of, but it's always good to visualize it and highlight it. This is our dependency on rare earth materials. Rare earth materials, everyone knows it. It's in the laptops, it's in the mobile phones, it's in the screens, it's everywhere. And at a certain point, especially here in Europe, we decided to outsource everything regarding the production, regarding the mining, everything which pollutes and is not or is a bit nasty. We do not want to have to. We outsourced it. Same we did with production to China and so on and so forth. So 20, 30 years ago, or even longer, we decided to give a lot of responsibilities away. But what we did is we created dependency on other countries, and this is in the first step neither good nor bad. It's a dependency, and if the need is, countries will leverage it. We have to be aware of that. And this is where we are now. We are now in 2024, where we face situations which we call perma-crisis. Yeah? We hear it every time. We've heard it in Thorsten's presentation as well. We have poly-crisis, perma-crisis, constant crisis mode, and it seems we do not come up to speed again, and we do not know why, and for many of us, it came by surprise. But honestly, I think it wasn't by surprise. Same as with the Rana Plaza example, I think there were indications we could have taken into account as companies, as governments, whatever it is, to be at least not so surprised by those things. And no matter how you call it, if you call it poly-crisis, perma-crisis, one thing is sure, we are not in Kansas anymore. I borrowed this line from The Wizard of Oz, not sure who has seen this movie, but there was this scene where Dorothy was taken by the tornado to Oz, to this new land where the magicians live, and she was intimidated, frightened, everything was different, and she said, I'm not sure where we are, but one thing is sure, we are not in Kansas anymore. And I think Europe, and we had a very similar moment 2-3 years ago when Russia attacked Ukraine, and there were signs we could have detected, we could have picked up, and we could have prepared for. Before I go on, before I provide a solution for this relatively bad outlook here, I want to take a deeper look on the actual risks when it comes to climate change and geopolitics, and what we can do. How can we measure our exposure? Because this is something actionable. Every company can do with some effort. And therefore, I brought this really cool paper from McKinsey. And McKinsey, I'm not sure if any one of you have seen it already, but what McKinsey did is they measured the geopolitical distance between countries. That sounds more complicated than it is. They took the US as one extreme, analyzed the UN, the United Nations voting patterns, and put China on the other end and analyzed their UN voting patterns. And depending of those two very different cultural values, they said, okay, you're either leaning more towards US from a geopolitical perspective, or you lean more towards China regarding the perspective. And then they mapped all the other UN votes of the other countries who are allowed to participate in the UN votes, and map the geopolitical distance. And this is very interesting because we think, for example, of nearshoring, what was top of mind the last 2 years, I guess. I heard it many times, or 5 years already since COVID, that we have to nearshore or friendshore. But what does this mean? If I go from Austria to Hungary, it's definitely nearshoring because we are geographically very close. But based on the UN votes, I might find out that they geopolitically are some further steps away than I thought, probably. And what is the point of all that? Is we want to be one step ahead, that we can catch issues before they arise. That's the whole goal of it. And if we know that we have certain suppliers in one area, and even as they did it here, and this is possible and doable, that we can link products like laptops to those countries, then we see we have a very broad geopolitical distance, and we know we have to expect tariffs, we have to expect some leverage actions, some negotiation actions maybe going on from those countries, and we are in not the best position to counter that maybe. So this is one important step, and this is a paper which is freely available. Look at it, check your suppliers, check in which countries they're in, and see if how your geopolitical distance is in this sense. Another very important point is that you check such indices, like the BlackRock Geopolitical Risk Score. It shows you, of course, it's not an exact science, but it shows you the tensions in the current world. They analyze data, they analyze news reports, they analyze sources from the embassies, whatever it is, and they give you a picture and tell you, look, currently, compared to 1 month ago or 1 year ago, we are in a more, in an elevated tension state. And why would you want to know that? It is because such indicators tell you that you have left Kansas. Such indicators tell you, look, something in the world is changing before something happened maybe. There is more indications of more news reports about geopolitics. There is more spent with the defense or whatever it is. And if you analyze those things and bring them together and map them with your supply chain, you have a very good chance to at least be aware of the issues. We're not talking about solving it, that's a completely different topic, but we are aware of it. The other big topic, and we will see it in the next 2 months, because this is unfortunately the season for it, is natural disasters. Natural disasters and climate change is a huge topic, and we had in 2023 61 severe natural events in Europe. And I just remember vividly the flood in Slovenia, where not only people died, but the supply chain was affected. The automobile industry has a high cluster there. And again, as you hear, they have a cluster there, automobile cluster is there. You have to map your supply chain, match it to some geopolitical or some natural disaster data, climate change data, and then you know what you could expect. But we do not have to go that far back. 2 weeks ago in Germany, again, severe flooding in several areas in southern Germany. And this is a highly industrialized zone there. We have the railway nodes for the European railway network there. So this is the first indication that we can check, okay, look, how would the railway network be affected if we are dependent on that? And we found the weakest link here, so just to bring back the analogy of the weakest link. Yeah, and then we have the other topic that we have to deal with things we cannot say for sure. That's what we do in risk management. We try to anticipate things which may or may not will come true. And what we are doing usually for that is we're creating scenarios. And scenarios are based on certain indicators. And going back to the flood example in Germany, we have in Austria and Germany an indicator which is called HQ100. It's like a high water mark or water throughput in a certain area, which is not exceeded for one time in 100 years. We had such events, unfortunately, several times the last 10 years. So you may ask, rightly, what value holds such an indicator which tells me statistically this is an event which happens only one day in 100 years, or one time in 100 years, and we exceed it every year. That's the point. We set this indicator 20 or 30 years ago, and the world changed. We had climate change, we have more droughts, soil getting drier, cannot absorb as much rain as it should, and it exacerbates the situations. And this is an indicator. If we cross this HQ100 for several times, it means we are not in Kansas anymore. It means something fundamentally has changed, and we have to adjust and question our core beliefs and core assumption and make new assessments. And this is what we do with scenario planning, and this is what we do with detailed analysis. And imagine if the board members plan to build a new plant somewhere in the world, a manufacturing site or a production site, and we as a resilience manager can come up with ideas and tell them, look, this is an area, maybe not today prone to natural disasters, but the analysis, which is also widely available from good sources for free online, the analysis tells us in 10 years, when you plan to have your ROI back, we may face severe interruptions there. Or you plan to build a manufacturing site in a country which is geopolitically very different to ours. Maybe this is of interest for the board. Maybe this is something they want to take into consideration. Right. So a lot of bad stuff here. Let's go to the solution, because this is also a very important part of the thing. And it's simple but not easy. It sounds more simple in theory than it is in practice. I'm totally aware of it, but we have to start somewhere. First, and this is for me always the starting point, we have to understand our footprint. When we do not know where our suppliers sit, which supply chains we utilize, which maritime choke points we use, which transport modes we use, how would we even be able to put it in context? How would we be able to assess or analyze any risk regarding that? You will have a hard time. You may have it incomplete or by accident, but this is by far not the best solution. Second step is analyze the risk exposure. Once you know your exposure, you can analyze it towards different risks. And the third part, also very important, is monitoring and mitigating. Monitoring is so important that we get a feeling for it when we leave Kansas, when we are in uncharted territory, to visualize that. And when we come to supply chain mapping, there are different approaches. So the classic approach, where 90% of all companies are, is relatively static, relatively spreadsheet heavy, I would say, and reactive. It's not very proactive, if we are honest. But it's a good starting point. If you connect the dots a bit further, even better, you can link a risk event maybe to a tier 1 supplier or a direct supplier, and can get in a quick reactive mode where you can manage the issues ad hoc. Ideal case, but many are not there yet, and hopefully every company will leverage at some point the technology available, is that we have multi-tier mapping. Multi-tier mapping is when you know your suppliers, of your sub-suppliers, of your sub-sub-sub-suppliers. This is multi-tier mapping. Because we have seen within the company, when we analyzed for our customers some supply chains, that maybe they are quite diversified with the direct suppliers and even with the second suppliers, with the suppliers of the suppliers, but then they have a concentration risk at the third level of their supply chain. This is an issue. You want to be aware of that. Doesn't mean that we can change anything yet, but you want at least to be aware of it. And if you map that to commodities and raw materials, this is very powerful. You can do analysis upfront, but also if something happened, you are very quick to react. So either way or the other, find a way to map your supply chain and list it and make it a structured approach and make it in a way that you are able to link risk events, media news or whatever it is, the information that there is an earthquake in Turkey, you want to be able to map this to a certain supplier. Once you have done that, starting point, map your supply chain. Once you have done that, you go to the next step. And this is, imagine you have mapped your supply chain and have now 100,000 or 10,000 of suppliers. You do not want to take care of every one of them. It's not feasible. We would have a risk and resilience team which would exceed every budget. What you want to do is put in a robust methodology, use indexes or risk scores or whatever it is, to funnel to the most important suppliers. Remember the weakest link. This is what we want to find out here. And once we have figured out who the high-risk suppliers is, who the bottleneck suppliers are, who whatever it is we want to take a deeper look at, we can focus on them. We can build partnerships. We can go in-depth audits, whatever it is. But we cannot do that with hundreds of them. We have to be very clear and narrow that down. Ideally automated, but this is also very much possible if you do it manually. And last but not least, you have the monitoring. You want to. Everyone knows the saying, "We draw on in data," and this is very true because we cannot link data to risk information. This is the key to get actionable information and actionable mitigation measures in place. If there is an event, if, for example, go back to the Rana Plaza example from the beginning, if there is a mentioning on Twitter that there are several strikes of the workers there because they claim that the work conditions are bad, you want to link that to that exact supplier of you. And you want to be aware that this is your supplier, because then you can act, then you can evaluate. Then we humans come in and say, look, we have to analyze that. We have to put some intelligence to that as well and see if this would threaten our supply chain. If this threatens lives, for example, for the Rana Plaza, and if we can do something about. And you want to be able to track that over time, because this is what let us know that we have left Kansas, that we are in an area of heightened tensions, that we are in an area where we have to be very cautious or maybe reassess our previous assumptions. And this is basically it. As I said, in theory, very easy. In practice, it takes some time. Ideally, some technology you can leverage, but at the end, is it that what we want to achieve? And just one last sentence. I'm pretty convinced that if every company, we've heard it before that there are very strong private-public partnerships. No society, no government can survive nowadays without a strong economy and resilient companies. And if every one of us takes a step in that direction, we strengthen, we harden the whole chain and make hopefully our whole society a bit more resilient and help us weather the storms. Many thanks.
Marco, thank you so much. We've got time for a couple of quick questions if you want to take a seat. Thank you. So maybe you could expand upon the idea of scenario planning. Could you tell us what the role of that is in high-impact events?
Especially in high impact events, that's very important. We deal with things which haven't been there yet, and we have to communicate it in a certain way to our management. This is the one thing. The other thing is when we create a scenario, we create indicators, because that's part of the scenario planning. And then we can measure if the scenario is correct or not. If I foresee an increased levels of floodings, and there is no increased level of floodings in the next years, then I can adjust the scenario and think, okay, maybe I have to readjust. That's the very important thing. And the other is for communication purposes. Yeah.
We've been talking quite a lot about AI over the last couple of days. How can companies or resilience managers leverage AI for more resilience, do you think?
Yes, so there is, on one hand, the high-end solutions, like we do with Prewave. The tier N mapping is done automatically with custom data, and our customers do not have to do a lot of work for that. We do this with the algorithms. But there is so much more out there currently. Who of you have used ChatGPT already intensely, or not so much? I have recreated, for example, the McKinsey paper you've seen here with the math behind that with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT costs 20 euros a month. So it's a very low entrance to AI, and every security and resilience manager could leverage that. Yeah.
How important do you think it is to communicate tough truths within companies?
Extremely. As we have seen, no one is helped if we sugarcoat messages, and I'm convinced that even if it's in the very moment uncomfortable, if we do not tell our managers the truth, they will have it will have a bad ending, and that is what we want to prevent.
And just finally, how do you balance this trade-off between rigid planning and more adaptive approaches?
Yeah, in business continuity management, we have two options. Usually we plan very intensely and hope that our planned scenario is very close to the reality. But if we have data available, if we have mapped our supply chains, for example, because, sorry, one thing I have to mention, this planning is always wrong. The process of planning is important, but the plans will always turn out wrong. What we can do when we have mapped thoroughly our supply chains and have it in a system which helps us access it, is we can be much more flexible, because then something happens, and I see in the moment what the possible future impacts are, and this is the power of AI in the future, and this is what we have to leverage to be much more flexible then.
Marco, thank you so much for joining us today once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.